Good evening, everyone. I'm here to guide you into a world of chilling tales that will accompany you on your journey to sleep. Before we embark on this adventure, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give the video a thumbs up. I'm curious to know where you're tuning in from and what time it is, so please share in the comments. Now, when you're ready, find your comfort and let yourself unwind. In the year 2005, a young woman residing in a secluded farmhouse, tending to her ailing elderly grandmother, was abruptly stirred from her slumber by a piercing and frantic scream. Rushing to her grandmother's room, she found her cowering beneath the sheets, resembling a frightened child. The young woman, whose name remains a mystery, shook her grandmother with urgency to draw her back to reality. Once her grandmother regained her composure, she recounted a chilling vision of a red figure standing by the door, a figure she could only describe as the embodiment of evil itself. The grandmother declared with conviction that she has never experienced a hallucination in her life, firmly believing that what she witnessed was undeniably real. A 67-year-old retired teacher arrived at the hospital, sharing her experience of seeing peculiar figures hovering above her. She insisted she wasn't losing her mind, and laboratory tests confirmed that two usual suspects of hallucinations, infection and drug interactions, were not at play. In the days leading up to her arrival at the hospital, the patient and her family were filled with worry, so much so that they sought the counsel of a priest regarding the possibility of an exorcism. The woman even created a drawing of. What she beheld was a creature with large teeth, eyes, and ears, its form elongated like a football. It was concluded that the woman experienced a condition known as Charles Bonnet syndrome, where individuals may perceive tiny figures, animals, vibrant moving shapes, or distorted visages. These visions dance before the eyes, silent and vivid, with no sounds to accompany their display. In the year 1995, a man named Tomakata faced the heart-wrenching loss of his mother to cancer. Overcome with grief, he isolated himself in his bedroom for days, enveloped in despair. One fateful night, he was stirred from his slumber by the unsettling sound of the wooden floor creaking, as if burdened by an unseen weight. As he glanced up, he was met with the haunting image of his mother standing in the doorway, silently observing him. His screams pierced the night, prompting neighbors to summon the police, who listened intently to his harrowing tale. Medical professionals found no evidence of any condition that could explain such vivid hallucinations. To this day, it remains a mystery, for he has not encountered her again. Since this happened when I was really little, and I lived alone with my single mom, she always came to check on me every night when she would get up to go to the bathroom. This one night in particular, I remember waking up thinking I heard something in my closet. I looked up and my mom was at the foot of my bed, giving me a playing wave. She told me to go back to sleep. She then went into my closet and PU. Led the door, was just barely open, and she just stood in there poking her head through the crack of the barely open closet. I remember vividly seeing her. I peeking through the crack at me, I laugh. Feel like any little kid would do in this situation, and then fell asleep moments later when I was eating cereal the next morning. I asked my mom why she was hiding in the closet last night, and she just opt and gave me a puzzled and concerning look. She told me she hadn't been in the room all night. At first, she assumed somebody had broken into the house, but she soon realized it was some kind of hallucination or dream. Since this experience, I have only had two other hallucinations, neither of them as vivid or as creepy as this one. I used to be a trucker and would do a lot of late night runs as usual. Oh, I had my coffee to keep me going through the night, and even then it would still be tough this night. However, I didn't have my coffee and things weren't going so well. On several occasions, I almost fell asleep behind the wheel, and I was only just barely able to save myself from completely drifting away by actually feeling the truck drifting off to the side of the road. Then, just as I thought I was gaining my awareness, I saw a black figure coming up in the road right in the path of the truck. I swerved to avoid the figure and just barely missed it. I had to come to a complete stop to try and gather my sanity back up as I glanced into the left rearview mirror. There it was, a figure lingering in the middle of the road. Typically, I shy away from confrontation in any scenario. Yet an inexplicable force urged me to step out of the truck and voice my thoughts. But as I emerged, the road lay empty before me. The figure had vanished, leaving me alone on this desolate stretch for miles. As I journeyed onward, I found myself pulling over after about 5 miles, surrendering to the embrace of sleep. It felt as though my mind was weaving a tapestry of illusions that night, leaving me to ponder the reason behind such a haunting vision. I was 133 years old. I never really had sleeping problems. I was actually a really heavy sleeper. It happened on a Saturday morning. I went to bed late the previous night. When I woke up, I couldn't move at all. The only thing I could control were my eyes. And when I moved my eyes to focus on the corner of the room, too saw the most horrifying thing I had ever confessed in my life there was. As a man, probably about 8 foot tall, with a cut open mouth dripping blood, made to look like a smile, and in the man's hand was a large carving knife. My biggest fear came true as the man started hovering too. Towards me, not walking, not even moving a single limb, just hovering over to me like a ghost. I tried to scream or move or anything, but I was paralyzed in my bed. The man reached the edge of my bed inches away from my face, and for the first time, he moved his arm up the arm with the knife, and he raised the knife up to the ceiling, and I knew what was going to happen next. I closed my eyes, the only thing I could physically do, and waited for it to happen. But as I lay there for probably 30 seconds, unharmed, I opened my eyes back up. The man was gone, and then I realized I could move. I got out of bed and ran. To explain what happened to my parents, they immediately seemed to understand and explained that I had just experienced sleep paralysis. I don't know why I hallucinated something so horrific, but the fear was genuine, and I can still remember the man's face today. Being a single mother and having to work 2 jobs, I always have to hire a sitter to watch my 3-year-old son. I have a long drive for my second job, and on a few occasions, I've almost fallen asleep behind the wheel from exhaustion. There was one night that I felt myself starting to doze off, so I tried pinching myself and shaking my head in joy. In anything to wake myself up. There were no lights at all on this highway, which made it even worse. And then I heard a giggling sound coming from behind me. I looked in the mirror and saw my 3-year-old looking at me in the back seat. I slammed on the brakes and looked at the back seats to find them empty. Just a mere 10 seconds passed when the phone rang. The sitter's voice breaking through with the news that he had taken a tumble down the stairs and fractured his ankle. In that moment, I was wide awake, racing home, and to this day, I hold on to the belief that mothers possess an extraordinary intuition regarding their children. This experience remains the most chilling event of my life. I reside in the countryside, though it is not an empty or forsaken place. I had a fair number of neighbors who were close enough that there was still woods in all directions, though I was home alone, as usual, one late night, when I heard a legit scream coming out in the woods. I went outside into my backyard with a flashlight just to take a look through the trees. This was late, and nobody was still up, and all the lights were out shining the light through the trees. I froze WH. And the light landed on a tall figure, probably twice as tall as me, and it had some kind of long trunk hanging from its face that went down to its waist, almost like an elephant. It was moving in some of creepy march in my direction. All that I could see from it was blackness. There was no color to it. I walked backwards into my house and slid the door shut, still looking in the direction of the thing. But it was gone. It completely disappeared from sight. I still sincerely hope what I saw and heard was just in my head. You can see some weird things when you're tired, but the thing about this story, I wasn't tired of me, and the family were on vacation to some resort in a very rural area of Pennsylvania. To make the setting creepier, there weren't many young people there for me and my brothers to hang out with. It seemed like more of an adult resort. But then one day, when I was walking outside of the main lodge of the resort, I for some reason looked up to a window on the 2nd floor and saw a girl looking down at me from that distance. She looked kind of cute, so I gave her a wave, but she didn't show any sign of reaction, so I just moved on. However, later that same day, I was so bored that I was sitting on the swing set at the little playground of the resort, and that's when I saw the same girl again. She was a little away from me, down past the playground close to the tree line, and she was just standing there staring at me. Being a teenage guy, my hormones control my body, and so I got off the swing and began walking over to her. As I started getting closer to her, I realized she wasn't as cute as I thought she was. There was something about her face that just gave off a creepy vibe. I can't put my finger on it, but if I had to say, I think it would have to do with her eyes and her mouth. I'd say once I got about halfway over to her, she turned around completely and ran into the woods. And I mean, she full-on ran into the woods. I halted in my steps, a chill running down my spine. This girl had an unsettling aura, almost like a shadow lurking in the corners of my mind. The rest of our stay at the resort passed in a blur, her image haunting me. As we drove home, miles stretching between us and the resort, my thoughts wandered back to her. I pondered the wild notion that if I had ventured into the woods after her, perhaps I could have discovered something thrilling, despite the peculiar twist in her features. But then, the sight that met my eyes next sent a jolt through me, as if my heart had plummeted into the depths of my stomach, forcing me to look down and confront the reality ahead. As we raced down the highway, I caught a glimpse of a girl standing by the tree line. Her gaze was fixed on me, unwavering, even through the tinted windows of our minivan. I turned to my parents, eager to share my discovery, but they simply asked, "Saw who?" In that moment, doubt crept in, and I began to convince myself that she was merely a figment of my imagination, a fleeting shadow that had never truly existed. I can tell you from experience that sleep paralysis is the scariest thing you can go through. I was 19 at the time, and unlike most other people, I had experienced sleep paralysis 3 times in my life. But on one horrible night, it happened a 4th time, and it was much worse than any other time, or anything in my life for that matter. I opened up my eyes just as the morning sun began to peek its light into my somehow open blinds, but I found myself unable to move. It's already a hellish experience enough, but what I saw only made it an intimate, scarring experience. There was a little girl standing by, the wall staring me down. At least I assumed she was, because her eyes were nothing but black. Anyone's neutral response would be to jerk up and scream or attack, but I couldn't do anything. The girl then Artade, taking giant exaggerated steps, stretching her legs more than humanly possible. She reached my bed and stopped, and finally she threw her hand around my throat and squeezed, and I couldn't breathe. She was choking me, and in reality, I couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to die, and I couldn't do anything about it. I was completely helpless. And then, just as I felt as if I were taking my final gasps, my hands jerked up, and I hit myself in the face. The girl was gone, and I was fully awake. I felt like I had been underwater for a whole minute, gasping for air. I had been truly cut off from breathing in air. But that wasn't even the scariest part. What I found the most terrifying, and you can only understand if you've experienced something like this yourself, was watching that little girl with her hands around my throat, choking me almost to death, and just sitting there watching and feeling it, unable to do anything.